I do think that there was a stigma that if you needed therapy, there was something really wrong with you. There's, something really wrong with your relationships, and people were very judgy. And I love the fact that I do feel that your generation and younger generations are super open to it. And there isn't like this embarrassing stigma around needing to get help with whatever area you need in your life.
No, it's never been the right time. Like we're holding back the storyline. And I'm waiting at the end of the night, thinking of you.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of the Call Your Mom podcast. We are so glad you made the choice to join us today because we're talking about therapy, something that everyone, I truly believe, needs to go to at one point in their life, whether that's to deal with trauma that you're walking through now or past trauma or to get your goals, whatever it may be. It really does ground you, shift your focus, and really provide insight and another look that you never thought before. So let's dive in what it means to go to therapy in your 20s and 30s. Mom, have you ever been to therapy? Like, tell me a little bit more if you've ever walked through that or needed to walk through that, and why. Like, why did you start going to therapy?
So, I actually started therapy when your dad and I got married. We were told we should do like marriage counseling to help work through like problems and things like that. And through actually going to marriage counseling, I actually learned stuff about myself. So, I was here thinking like, oh, we're just going for each other, right? To learn how to like work through our problems. But therapy actually helped me realize a lot of the issues that we were dealing with were root issues in us individually before we even got married or even got together.
That's so cool that your first interaction with therapy was like through marriage counseling, then it went to the next step. Does that make sense? Like you kind of
Yes.
started to figure out things about yourself through doing things with your partner, which is kind of cool. I know I've done something similar, but I've actually walked through therapy before marriage and after marriage. I've actually had it with the same counselor too. And then when I was a lot younger, when I was 16, my mom put me into counseling where I discovered that I had period issues. Yay! I had PMDD. I think that's what it was. Basically, I had extreme mood swings around my period.
No, you didn't. Never.
I think Johnny would argue that those still happen. But though that was like my first experience with therapy. Other than that, I watched you go to marriage counseling and like marriage retreats with dad growing up and watched you guys, walk through that and things like that.
Mhm. So, did you and Johnny, do you guys still go to therapy? I know you started going to therapy like right before you guys got married, but like, do you guys still go on occasion?
We went to therapy right when we got well, right. Well, okay. We did two types of therapy. So we did premarital counseling. And then
Mhm.
after we got married, we went into like a deeper therapy with my therapist that I'd already had prior to getting married. That was really cool because it gave a lot of insight into who I was and the trauma that I had walked through and why I was reacting a certain way in my marriage. So a lot of therapy was surrounded around me, which was hilarious because every time we'd go into therapy, it'd be like, okay, when are we going to talk about Johnny? And would always lean back to talking about me, which is fine. I just think it's really funny to just think back now and finally remember we finally got to him. And I was like, yeah, you have issues too. Because we all have a little bit of issues. But Johnny is like a golden retriever puppy. So he was like, what? Actually, we had someone last night at the movie theater goes, say to him, you have really big golden retriever energy. I was
And
like, that's why I married him.
that's not a bad thing. That's not a bad
No.
thing at all.
So yeah, that's the type of therapy like I said, I've been to individual and marriage. And we started doing that because we were walking through a lot of different things in our first year of marriage. Like
Mhm.
he lost his job, I was starting a business. So there was a lot of money shifts and a lot of, oh my gosh, how do we do this? And probably the first set or not probably the first 7 months of our marriage we were apart. So we
Mhm.
then came together and it was like all this friction. And so we didn't quite get that like honeymoon phase of the first 7 months of marriage that people normally get. It was all like jam packed into like at the end of the year when he came home in September.
Yeah, totally.
And it was not a positive thing that like when he came home, like versus like, it was negative. He had lost his job, it was heavy. So that's in turn
Yeah.
why we went to therapy.
Yeah. And I think it helped you guys with learning to live with each other because you guys didn't live with each other. And so you get used to living on your own. And then here you guys are thrown back together, having to live together. So I think
Exactly.
that was part of what was helpful about it for you guys.
Oh, 100%. And it's funny. There was a stigma around therapy, and I think there is still a stigma around therapy. So when I first suggested to John, "Hey, let's go to therapy," it was like, "Oh my gosh, we're falling apart. Why would we need a therapist?"
Yeah.
And I was like, "No." He's like, we have that severe mental issues." I was like, "No, John, that's not what therapy is only for. Like, it's not just for people who have severe depression. It's not just for people who have severe anxiety or any other mental issue. It's for walking through, learning about yourself, learning about different ways to cope with things, learning how to be compatible with people, interact in the world. It's a lot of self reflection as well. And it's almost like a neutral person to tell you, like, hey, this is what you look like in your life. So
Yeah.
the stigma of therapy, I would say for him was, you know, it's only for like severe mental issues. And for me, I had grown up being like, oh, we got an issue. Let's try to go to therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. Therapy is like, I always say, like a bird eye view. Somebody gets a bird's eye view of your issues, your kind of your life without having a biased perspective. So they get a bird's
Yeah.
eye view of your life, your issues, what you're going through without having a biased opinion about anything in your life. They're just a neutral
Yes.
party that gets to help you work through whatever it is that you're going through. And I think that's so important because a lot of times we go try to talk to people like in our life, like, our friends, our family members, and they already have a kind of tilted perspective about what you're talking about because they're coming from their own point of view, or maybe they're coming from the point of view of having seen you walk through whatever it is you're talking to them about. And maybe they have like a bias against maybe a person that you're having the problem with that you need to go to therapy for. And so they're going to give you their opinion, where a therapist takes a step back and is able to give you their unbiased opinion and help you actually get to the root issue of whatever it is you're going
Yes.
through. And that's what I love about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's goes back to people reflecting their fears onto you
Yeah.
as well, especially
Hmm.
when you open up about things. They're gonna choose to kind of defend you. So it
Yeah.
really depends on what party you're talking to. So that's what therapy is so great for. But going back to the stigma, because I really want to stick to like this first part,
Hmm.
do you believe that there's a generational gap between people in my generation and even younger and even a little bit older than me that really go to therapy, they accept it, they don't see it as like a negative thing versus maybe people who are a little older who see therapy as more negative? Like, do you see that gap? What do you think that stigma is for your generation?
I just think like my generation, we didn't talk about it. Like you guys have a generation where you're online, you guys are on Instagram, TikTok, social media, and it's like out there. People are talking about it. They're talking about their mental health. They're talking about the importance of therapy. Now there's, better help and, all these different online therapies that you can get. And I think that the stigma that we had was that, you didn't talk about it. So then therefore, if we weren't talking about needing help, having mental health issues, having issues in our marriages and that type of thing, then why would we talk about therapy?
Yes.
Because it wasn't even being really talked about. I know growing up, I did not ever hear about therapy. I didn't, you know, grow up around it. And so for me, to get married to your dad so young and have someone say, hey, you guys need counseling. I am just such a laid back person. I was like, sure, that sounds good, because I had no idea what I was doing. We got married so young. So I'm like, I'll take all the help I can get. But little did I know that going into therapy, it was going to help me so much. But yeah, I do think that there was a stigma that if you needed therapy, there was something really wrong with you. There's, something really wrong with your relationships, and people were very judgy. And I love the fact that I do feel that your generation and younger generations are super open to it. And there isn't like this embarrassing stigma around needing to get help with whatever area you need in your life.
Yeah, whether that's career or, I mean, I think there's therapy for kind of everything. I think there's even sex
Yes.
therapists.
Yes, there is.
But, it's very important to be honest because I think it's kind of created a conversation around mental health and kind of helped people walk through different areas in life and also heal relationships, which I think is so important, is healing relationships, especially because I feel with the social media, it's the swing on the other side. People don't know how to talk to each other anymore. They're scared to go talk to people. Have anxiety over starting conversation. They have anxiety over being confrontational. And therapy is allowing the generation that seems to be stuck to our phones to learn how to actually have conversations, walk through difficult things, and create a life where we do get to interact because it's not the same. It's not the same anymore. And it's amazing how we can have an open conversation about it. I know for me, when I first entered into walking through therapy, it wasn't like, I mean, it's not like my life was blowing up when I first went to therapy at 16. I would just had a high emotions, high amount of hormones. I didn't know what to do with all my emotions. Like I was whacked out. But now as an adult, and everything I walked through, choosing to go to therapy a little older looked a lot different. I now had different circumstances in my life that had created negative things in my head and negative outlets, negative habits, negative ways I react in flight or fight. And I needed to actually go to therapy and work all those out. And it really, really got exaggerated when I got into a marriage because you feel very comfortable. That's the person that you feel the most vulnerable with. And so when I got into therapy with my marriage, I was really able to open up and discover why I was reacting a certain way, why I chose to do things a certain way, how to respond to my husband and why he is reacting a certain way. And therefore, it also helps me react in different relationships when I'd get in fights with friends or with you, mom, or my siblings or my grandparents, whoever it may be. It gave me tools in order to basically communicate better when really I was communicating in a different way based off of what I had walked through in my trauma. And it was so enlightening and also freeing to be able to understand myself and then walk myself through certain patterns and also break patterns. I think that's so important too. When you go to therapy, you are able to actually break patterns. And I was able to walk through like cognitive behavior and have a new outlook on life, think more positive. And that really created a outlook when it comes to all different kinds of circumstances in my life, big or small. Great.
I feel like you're literally, to sum that whole thing up, therapy has helped heal your relationship with you.
Yes.
And I've seen it. So I've watched you walk through it, and you definitely have grown so much and learned so much about yourself. And I've seen you explain to me the reason why you maybe reacted a certain way. And then you're able to explain to me, well, this is the root of why. And you learned that in therapy. And I think it's so amazing. And I know it does, because you heal your relationship with you when you go to therapy. I think it just ultimately spills out onto other relationships and helps you heal relationships with other people and sustain them. You know what I mean?
A hundred
So,
percent, 100%.
yeah.
And I think it in turn makes you again, like I said, feel freer because you're
Yes.
able to understand why you're reacting a certain way, or maybe why
Mhm.
you have anxiety, or maybe why you're walking through depression. Basically, what I learned about myself is I was always in flight or fight. I
Mhm.
never got out of fight or flight for basically like 10 years of my life. And would say this last year is the first year I've kind of started to let go of that. Specifically when I went to Arizona and then even more now here in New Hampshire. Just last night, I was just talking to my mom on the phone about this, but last night with Johnny, we were just noticing little things about me where like I would be so high strung about certain things that I like relaxed. And Johnny goes, "This isn't like what happened?" And he goes, "You're relaxed." And I was like, "Yeah."
For reference, my daughter is a total type A, but her type B came out.
Yes.
That was the whole thing that they noticed. Like the type B side of her finally came out, and I'm total type B. So,
Yes, like, I would be very, like, adamant about waking up at a certain time, having a certain schedule, and when I was depressed, I would let a lot of that go, but I'm not depressed, I'm more of, not living in that fight or flight mode, and I've noticed I'm okay going like, my husband sleeps in almost every single day, but he does have to stay awake until, like, midnight sometimes, but I'll go like, I'll be working in the morning, and then mid-morning I'll go in there and like just lay with him and we'll chat and talk and laugh. And before I'd be like so stressed out, I'd be like, I can't do that, John. I have to work. I have to do this. And he would be like, okay, and I wouldn't eat or I would be irritable, easily irritable. And like now I'm just like laying in bed mid-morning. Who would have thought?
I know for me, therapy really helped me learn to identify my limiting beliefs. I had grown up with a lot of them around, who I am, what I could achieve, around money, and I didn't know that. And so I was operating from a space in my daily life around those limiting beliefs and not allowing myself to venture out beyond those belief systems. I was scared and I thought, well, that's what it is. This is who I am. This is it. And therapy really helped me identify those things and be able to push my boundaries and retrain my brain to think differently and to think outside of my narratives that were playing like a record over and over in my brain. And that was
Mm.
something I really needed because I was getting stuck. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when they're stuck, it's so important to get therapy because then you can have somebody again with an unbiased opinion who's getting a bird's eye view of your life as they speak to you to help you understand why it is you're doing what you're doing. And maybe it is limiting beliefs or and those narratives just playing over and over in your brain. And so that's kind of one of my experiences with therapy that totally helped me, especially because my childhood was so chaotic and there was just so much trauma. So it helped me heal a lot of those spaces within myself so that I could be okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's basically what to sum up, was you walk through cognitive therapy where
Mhm.
you are rewriting a little bit of how your brain thinks. And I walk through that too, where, you would tell yourself certain things based off of what something was happening, right? So
Mhm.
I am no therapist, but this is what I learned. We would basically, whatever the outcome of something was, we in our heads were telling us a certain story. And I
Mhm.
was basically broken it down into A, B, C, right?
Mhm.
A, was our thought process. C was what was the outcome or the thing. And B was action in the middle. And that was really interesting for me to kind of break down because sometimes we would do something based off of what we're telling ourselves. You would, what you were choosing to do, right? Or choosing to believe about yourself was then making you in turn not do X and then giving
Mhm.
you this outcome. And then it would also vice versa, where you would already see this outcome and you would react a certain way. And then it was this thought when really they had nothing to do with each other. So it's so amazing to be able to break that cycle and take an outlook, bird's eye view, and be like, whoa, that's not really what was happening. And my brain was just telling me this based off of trauma or someone
Yeah.
else's opinion that I've been told my whole life, or fear that I have driven, or shame. There's all these different things that we have that have built us that are also negative. We have positive and negative that have built us into who we are. And that's also part of our thought process as adults.
Yeah. We carry all
So
those things.
we do carry all those things. And to go to therapy and be able to, open that up and dive right in is really important. Even though some people are scared. People are scared. That's the thing. People are scared to know the truth. You gotta speak the truth to your therapist.
Yes.
You have to admit the truth to your therapist. And that means you got to admit the truth to yourself.
Yeah. Therapy only works when you're honest.
100%.
So when you're just completely honest, it's a safe environment. They're not going to go tell anybody.
Nope.
That's the only time it works. So
Yes.
I always crack up when people keep going, they're going to therapy but they're not really telling their therapist the true story or what's really going on. And so then they're getting kind of like half answers. And I'm like, if you're paying for this, just be honest.
Yep.
It works so much better and so much faster.
Give all of the facts.
Yes.
And honestly, people can read when you're not giving them all the facts.
Oh,
so
totally.
even if you are going to therapy, they're going to see the missing holes in your story.
Totally.
So to be honest,
Yeah.
but we've all avoided it because sometimes therapy requires you to look at yourself, and not all of us are ready to look at ourselves.
Yeah. So if you're not ready to dive in, you could always just tiptoe in.
Yes. Take one toe at a time.
Yes.
I mean, that's happened to me. That is a great way to say that happened to me, where I needed to just tiptoe in. Like with my husband, it was like, we need to go for us. It was never about what I had walked through or what I was having a crisis about or my trauma. It was, we need to go for us. So when we went, it was about our marriage. I didn't want to talk about myself. But then it was like, the reason why you're walking through this is because you had a traumatic experience. Like, yeah, I know. I know. I remember I walked through that. I know. I don't want to talk about it. Okay. Until eventually I was like, oh, I got to talk about it.
You're like, moving on.
I was like, what about him?
Yes.
That's how I felt. Like that mean that they're like, what? He can't do that. Amanda, I'm an adult. I need to calm down. But okay, so let's dive into some stats. Okay.
Yes.
So why is therapy trending? Let's talk about that. Nearly 40% of millennials and Gen Z have attended therapy, higher than any other previous generations. Okay, we've talked a little bit about that stigma, right? But I feel like therapists weren't really around. I mean, if you really want to dive into all this, I feel like it was kind of not really around in the news, I would say.
Well, you weren't born yet, but
I'm asking you, Mom, you were.
So I was really little in the 80s, but I know that they were around because your grandma worked actually at a psychologist's office.
Oh, yes.
And so I know that it was around, and it was actually, she worked at a mental health hospital, but I don't just think there wasn't the exposure that there is now, and there weren't the studies on how important it is to, treat the brain as it is now. I think that, mental health just wasn't spoken about either as it is now. So I think we're just exposed to more awareness around mental health and around just using therapy to, like you said, for work, for marriage, for self-improvement or whatever, not just our mental health. And I think that because there is so much exposure now, I think it just feels like there's more therapists and there's more opportunity to get help. And I mean, technology's really helped because there is FaceTime now. So you don't actually have to, if you can't go into a therapist's office, it's in your hands. It's on your laptop.
The telehealth. Yeah.
Yes. You can, text counseling. I mean, I read somewhere someone was using ChatGPT as their like life coach.
That's like a running joke. People are using
Yes,
chat. I don't use ChatGPT this way, but other people do, where they'll just
same.
talk to ChatGPT and be like, this person did this thing. Do you think it's right? And then
Mhm.
ChatGPT will answer.
Yes,
Like, I still think there's some component of like human that needs to be in this. Like,
yes,
I do
absolutely.
understand you could just talk to ChatGPT, but I
Yeah,
do really believe that there's got to be some sort of human heart in
absolutely.
that.
But
Yeah.
I truly do think that's why your generations though, I think that the generations that are younger than me are they have more access. I just think that, and it's not embarrassing anymore, or at least not as much as it used to be. I mean, it may feel a little embarrassing at times, but I just think that it's okay now to be like, I'm depressed, I have anxiety, I don't know what to do with my life, I'm having trouble in my marriage. Just all kinds of reasons to get counseling. I just think it's just more accessible and more acceptable.
I have two thoughts on this. The
Okay.
first one being, I know with me and my friends, therapy's like, oh, you're going to therapy? You go, girl. Like, there's no thought process in this. But I feel with men, it's a little
Okay.
different. I feel like
Ooh.
if Johnny were to go onto the baseball field and say, you guys, I just had a really good session with my therapist. I don't know if that would translate the same. I'd have to ask him, but like us girls are like, oh my gosh, that's so good. Let's talk about our feelings.
Yes,
Men, like,
girl.
I just don't think they're going to do that. I don't, maybe
Yeah.
like his is like my mental performance coach. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, it's like a little bit more, but I don't think with women. And I think that's kind of a side like
Yeah.
conversation. But another part of this is stress. Like, do you think our generation has more or less stress than previous generations? And we could really dive into a lot of this, but
Oh my gosh, yes.
mostly around like economically, like inflation, how much the cost of living is nowadays, job pressures, the social media providing pressure to have a certain status, like keeping up with the Joneses.
Mhm.
Do you think that is even more pressure now than ever that's kind of causing us to want therapy because we are feeling like we're behind in life, or we're feeling like we're
Mhm.
never going to be able to afford things or
Yeah.
get things in our life because of how fast everything is moving?
It's funny you should say that. I just read online one of the top things that women in their 20s to 30s worry about is that they're behind in life. And I really do think there's more pressure, and it's kind of indisputable. I mean, I would not have wanted to grow up in an era that had social media when I was younger. I would have been so insecure and so anxiety ridden about my body, about my accomplishments, about my friendships, about my relationship. I mean, there's just so many things that just the power of social media makes you guys feel, let alone the pressures of the world itself, like you said, jobs, inflation, fertility. I'm seeing more and more women feeling or having problems getting pregnant, which I had no idea was like a real problem because when
Yeah.
I was younger, and so now I'm seeing more of that. And I do feel like there is more pressure. Absolutely 100% would say there's more pressure. And I think that is a driving factor for people to, especially women, to go get therapy and to figure out, you know, what they want in life, to help them with their stress, to make decisions behind their careers, behind having children, getting married. There's just so many factors that are driving you guys to have anxiety and depression, I feel like, that thank goodness there is more counseling available than ever, and that you guys are so open to it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I just looked up a stat with, because I was going to say 1 in 5 women have infertility
Mm-hmm.
issues, but it's 1 in 7 women in America have infertility issues.
Mm-hmm.
So that is very, you're right. That is one of the things. Also, just getting married older or feeling the pressure of finding a spouse is another thing I would add to that. I got very lucky with Johnny finding him so young, but
Yeah.
I will be with friends at a bar and people come up to us and ask, how'd you meet your spouse? How did it work out? How, like, all those questions. And I
Mm-hmm.
think it's very interesting that there's this pressure of that like next step. And
Yeah.
I think it's just the next step in general, whether that's to buy a house, make a career move, buy the next purse, or get in a relationship. All of that is such heavy pressure, which is causing in turn more of that anxiety and depression, because it's like, how do you even keep up, which I think
Yeah.
is a whole other podcast in itself. But bringing
Yeah.
it back to therapy, I think that's why it's more common than ever. And thank God that there are people out there who are willing to listen to people's problems all day, because that takes patience and
Yeah.
wisdom and a lot of schooling. And I think I am so happy that I took the brave step to go to therapy and work through the things that I will. And I'll always be someone who's like, I need to go. My therapist right now is like, you're in maintenance mode. So,
That's
you
good.
know, I don't have to go all the time, but it still is something that is on a regular basis, especially when something shifts big in my life. I always make sure to go right away.
Yeah. I was just thinking when you were talking right now, even at my age, the pressure to just, be young is so big, like on social media with, the way women look and, aging gracefully and, having the right career and, even am I behind in life? You know what I mean? That actually has made me want to go into therapy again and to have those conversations so that I can, untangle all those feelings because, all my kids are grown. So, that's a whole nother, part of life that I have to walk through. So there's a lot of things, even at my age, where I'm going to therapy and I'm having those conversations because, the pressures, you know, are always going to be there. Your feelings are like a roller coaster. You're always on the ride. It's sometimes smooth, but a lot of times it's uphill and downhill. And I feel like, you know, sometimes you're going to feel great and other times you're going to feel stressed or maybe you feel a little down or whatever it might be. But that's the great thing about therapy is it's
Mhm.
always there. And, when you find the right counselor and you kind of keep that, relationship, you can keep going back whenever you need. So like you're in maintenance mode, but when you do need them, they're there and you can jump in
Yes.
at any time.
And as we wrap this up, guys, and we talk about going to therapy and doing this, I think there's one last question that we're probably all asking ourselves. Like, how do you know therapy is working? Like,
Mm-hmm.
if I were to choose an instance of like, oh, I know therapy is working in my life particular, would be in the way that I treat others. Because, like my mom said at the very start, you start to unlock a lot of things in you. And not that you were a bad person before, but it does bring your attention to things that you did prior and gives you a little bit more consciousness into the actions, your words, the things that you do every day in your life, and also the way you treat you. It's not just how you treat others. I would say how you treat you, whether that's getting up in the morning at a certain time and having a schedule finally, or maybe it's like me, finally relaxing. It doesn't matter what it looks like, but starting to take a deeper look at you and how you treat others or treat yourself. And I would say one big instance for me would be slowing down in arguments. I was someone who would really, really want to prove myself right just because I'm very stubborn. And I started to notice that I needed to slow down in arguments, especially with my husband, because he'd be like, "You are 5 steps ahead of me." And I'm like, well, can't you keep up? No, you can't. So I learned to be patient and to also, it was better to be in relationship than to prove that I was right.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were able to actually calm down and have a contrite heart first, I learned, oh, they're actually going to be emotional towards me and listen to my side as well. And we're going to resolve this a lot quicker than if I were to just keep going. And I know for me, that really, really kind of showed me, oh my gosh, therapy is working, because I wasn't reacting to protect things that had happened to me based on my trauma. I wasn't reacting to protect myself, because that's kind of what you do. You go and
Mm-hmm.
you protect yourself.
Yeah.
And I was actually reacting and realizing, yeah, I was angry. I was having these emotions, but whoa, there's another person in front of me that I also need to to understand and to get their emotions. So then we can come together and resolve.
Yeah.
That was like a big like aha moment. Therapy's working for me. What about you, Mom?
Oh my gosh, I love everything you just said. That is amazing. And I've actually watched it all play out. So everything you're saying is 100% true.
Thank you.
I'm verifying. One of the things that therapy actually helped me do was to start showing up for myself. I think a lot of what I grew up with was I was so afraid to not be everything to everyone and to keep the peace, and that I would forget about myself. And I think therapy really helped me realize like it's okay to have boundaries. It's okay not to, be perfect when you're trying to do something. Like, for instance, I love to write and I love to share it. And I would just keep it to myself because I was so afraid of not being perfect when I put it out, that someone was going to criticize it. And, showing up as myself with how I want to dress and the things I want to do and who I want to be, because I was a chameleon. And so I would just be whoever to, whoever, whenever they needed it. And I wasn't being me and I wasn't showing up for me. And therapy really helped me unravel that so that I could become the authentic version of me. And it took a long time. It wasn't like an overnight process, but now I can genuinely say like, I love who I am and who I'm becoming. I love putting my work out and sharing it with the world. And if someone disagrees, it's okay. They have the right to disagree or not like something of mine. But is it going to shake my whole world? No, because that's just life. And therapy's taught me that. It's taught me to show up, be who I am, love myself so that I can love others better, and just allow myself to be me. And that's really what therapy's done for me, a lot of it.
Yeah. So you would say, how do you know therapy is working? You would say how you treat yourself.
Yeah.
Going back to what I said, and I think, and how you treat others. I really too believe those are some of the biggest green flags you'll see as you start to walk through therapy is how you're treating yourself and how you treat others. And you'll start to see the impact it makes and in your mood, and obviously feeling lighter and feeling more positive, and your thought process changes. Lots of green flags when you go to therapy.
Yes, lots and lots.
Okay, so I want to leave you guys, with a little question and stuff like that, but like, because we want to interact with you, we want to get to know you. First of all, share this with a friend who needs this, who, and that's you being a friend to someone else saying, hey, friend, I think you need to hear this. Because maybe they're scared of going to therapy, or maybe they are walking through something and you're like, hey, friend, here's a little nudge to get you to go heal and be the best version of yourself. So please share this with a friend, family member, spouse, whoever you need to push that and help them as well. And of course, we really appreciate it. But we want to ask you guys, have you ever been to therapy? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear about it, and we'll see you next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope this episode gave you something to think about, inspired you, or made you feel a little less alone. We hope you share this with a family member or a friend because they definitely need it too.
And if you like what you heard, don't forget to follow and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen.
Let's get social. You can follow us on Instagram at callyourmom_podcast, on Facebook at callyourmompodcast, and on YouTube at Call Your Mom Podcast.
And if you're needing a little extra advice, you can always text MOM, M-O-M, to 833-569-4378. Follow the prompts, answer the questions, and then spill the tea.
And we might be answering your tea on next week's episode, so you're going to want to check it out. And remember, when life gets messy, overwhelming, or just straight up confusing, you can always
call your mom.